What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the second ever Crunch Time for MMA. What a heck of a week last week, Drew. We gave out right away. I mean, we have to laugh, right? We said Grasso legitimately has a chance here. And not to mention, you need a lot of things to go right for that to happen. I'm very, very lucky to have taken the first and second place in the big GPP last week. So thankful for everybody that's reached out. Drew, you helped me, buddy. I mean, we kind of pinpointed it. We said Grasso's more live. The numbers were outrageous on her, right? But 5 rounds to work with and potentially every single favorite winning, that was a perfect recipe.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short. I think Grasso was all you, buddy. But yeah, I think the lower owned plays are right around that $9,000 number was really where the leverage stood. Everyone was kind of avoiding it going above that to I forget the girl that lost to Grasso, but they're going to her and then like two other guys, and that was pretty much it. So dropping down below that was a lot of leverage. And what was nice for you is you got those fights out of the way early, so you kind of knew where you stood with Grasso as the last fight or one of the last fights. But with 97.5% ownership for you, that's pretty good. It's a pretty good stand. So congrats as well.
That's 100% certain. Like I think you have to look at these things in the realm of possibilities, right, Drew? And of course, Ricci was somebody that I think on the show I said don't play, right? But that was because she has a very limited path to scoring high. I thought it would be a 3-round decision. In a finish, of course, she's right there, going to be a massive upside. But overall, let's move on to this slate, man. This is an amazing slate for us here. Remember, we are on FanDuel, this podcast sponsored by FanDuel. You can sign up today, FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal betting state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customers bet $20 on any market and get $200 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions may apply. Offer not available in Massachusetts because you lucky folks in Massachusetts get a $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. That's me, Drew. I get $200 for free off of $5. I'm taking advantage of that, guys.
That's me too.
Let's go, Rob. Thank you, Rob, on the sticks.
Congrats to Massachusetts, by the way.
Yeah, big.
Was it Friday you guys launched yesterday or Thursday?
Friday, 10 a.m. Everything was live. Into both sports books. Man, it's overwhelming with how many different promotions there are. Really amazing. Yeah. But we'll dig up some bets for you guys. Most importantly, we're trying to take down the fantasy streak, Drew. And for you in your contest selection this week, what is it and why is it not just MMEing? Because this slate just screams MME. Oh, it really does. It's not. This is definitely not a cash slate. I will say that right away.
Yeah, it's pretty tough from a cash perspective. I think the chalk is going to be pretty overwhelming. But yeah, for my perspective, so I went ahead and I reserved a couple lineups and I just kind of hand build a few just to tinker. And then I come back depending on how those builds go. And I try to get an idea of like, hey, how am I going to approach this slate? And by the time I did that, then all the contests filled earlier this morning. So I am going to single entry my way to a victory, unlike Mike, who took down the MME or the GPP last week. I'm trying to take down some of these single entry. One's actually a 3-max. The $200 3-max is not full on DK. So for whatever that's worth, it's got a really good price structure. But yeah, trying to hand build these, just going through the odds, and we'll talk through some of these, obviously get the technical expertise from you. But as far as like big time scoring, there's a huge drop off once you get into the 7K range. So I know some of the Vegas odds look somewhat similar, 60-40 split. I mean, that's really like it's close to even odds. We'll give the benefit of the doubt there. But when we talk about actually inside the distance, it's a huge drop off. So hate to sound like Blender there. But that's a lot of the leverage spots that I look at. And as I go down in pricing, inside the distance matters less to me. It's more about, their upside in winning and then with the price and the ownership. But to be honest, man, it's, there's a lot of green and then just straight red, in my spreadsheet this week.
Yeah. And I think there's many different talking points for this card, right, Drew? Like we talked pre-show, I sent you some notes. I think there's ways extremely to be unique on this slate. Starting point for me on this one, I think even more so than the main event, is we have our first odds value guy at Carlston Harris, Drew. We have not had this in a very long time. implied probability about over 70% here, 8,300 on this slate. I think ownership's right there, right? He's going to be somebody, if you're building a cash optimal lineup, it's a click, move on to the next spot, right? Then you go to the main event. These are going to be the natural builds that people are going to make this week. And how are you going to handle a guy like this that's going to be 70% implied? His percent owned is going to be 50%. This is the first night of the night, Drew. You could be happy with your, 90 points, 100 points. And I'm not guaranteeing he's going to do that. I'll get my X's and O's in a minute. But how are you going to handle our first odds value guy in a very long time?
Yeah, unless you're going to tell me something about Gooden that is sneaky, he'll probably be the guy that I just jam into every lineup. So I think at the price, and there's still leverage. So like you said, I have actually ownership just below 50%. I don't know why that would be with the value, but with the leverage that you have, he is one of the highest values, highest leverage spots that you can get. So like you said, 72% implied win total at 8,300, but he's 60% implied inside the distance. I think he's like 40% just in round one. So, 31% inside of round one. So, to me, man, I don't overthink that one. That one's just jam it in. If it was like, I think the tougher decision is really up top with like Batista. But as far as like a value there, that's one where like you don't have to go all in on him if you don't want to. I think a lot of people talk about like you got to take a stand on a value like that. You can go overweight and still have 30% of your lineups that have. Without Carlston Harris, you're not dead. So that's where I stand. I think he's a jam it in spot.
Yeah, and these are the type of plays long term. I think I just match the field, go overweight to the field. Like Ananda Nunes is somebody that I'm just going to lock on every slate. Like she's a fighter that puts up a great point per dollar type of play. And the reason why I do that is because her ceiling is greater than everybody else. And when you have these spots, it's like you're being dealt a great opportunity with Harris. It's not like the guy is. If he was 8,800, I might consider fading. But here's the thing. Correct. Let me break down the X's and O's, Drew. Carlston Harris, a striker at heart. I expect this fight to be more of a slower pace if they don't just swing and bang for the first 2 or 3 minutes. It's going to be a slow pace. These guys are more apt to do the 1-2s right at distance. So I actually think this thing can bust. I'm not trying to be the crazy guy that goes on here on every show and say it busts. But what does it make me want to do? I mean, I want to try to match the field on Harris, right? If I got 10 lineups, I'm probably going to have to put him in 5 lineups to match the field because that value is literally being handed to you. Yeah. But how are you going to handle a guy like Gooden? This is a guy who will come in and swing and bang. Harris has been knocked out in the past. Again, slower 1-2 combination. So it's not like the guy's going to put up 1,000,000 points over 3 rounds. The equity on this fight is still in the first round. So I think I want to let people get crafty if they think that Gooden at 6,900 has a chance. Like he's actually expected 12% ownership.
Yeah, I have him at 10.
Yeah,
I think a good approach is, like you said, you can either match the field with Carlston Harris, and if you do, you can also match the field Gooden or go double the field, and you're not like killing yourself. Because I do think it's still a good fight, like you said, inside the distance. Like if we're just talking about finishing, 80% between the two of them inside the distance. So I mean, like it's a pretty good chance of one of them doing. It's like to say it busts, even at 8,300. I think if it goes to a decision, I don't know if it necessarily busts at his price though. Like he might still be a key piece in an optimal lineup, depending on how the top range goes. So that's my opinion at least.
Yeah, there's leverage all over the place. So I'm going to talk about some leverage spots later with you. And I think that's my starting point, right? Like, I think a lot of people will like to start their lineups with the main event. I think that's the incorrect thought process. You've got to make your decision on how you're going to handle that odds value for Carlston Harris. We will move on to the main event, said main event. That's going to garner almost 80% of the ownership on this slate. Peter Yan versus Merab Dvalishvili. This is compelling, man. I don't think I've ever seen more of a DraftKings fantasy FanDuel slate in a long time, man. This is the prolific scorer, Merab Dvalishvili, man. This guy has the endless ceilings in his fights. And at 7K, this is a guy long-term I want. I mean, he scored 150 points, 130, 164. And it's like when he gets finishes, it's even more of a high ceiling. So this guy is averaging 113.4 points for you in your lineups. I love him. I mean, this is a guy I'm going to be hard to avoid in my builds. Now, how do you get different? If you're going to be taking Peter Yan in your tournament, you're going to really hope he kills off that 40% ownership. I think that's an important aspect of your decision making. At 9,200, he's got to be killing off those Stahasvilis, because the path of victory, Drew, is takedown, takedown, takedown. What does that do? It limits the upside for Yan over 5 rounds, ultimately in this spot. But I also think when you're trying to make Dahasvili lineups, leave money on the table if you're going first place, Drew. Isn't that the thought process? Because people are going to start their lineups with them.
Yeah, especially in like the contest that I'm in. To be honest, I'm looking at kind of fading this fight, unless you think that it's going to be super active. Because
there's 2 ways. There's 2 ways to go, Drew. You fade it knowing you're screwing yourself if Merab hits 160 points and whatever, you're ripping those ones up. Or you're playing this spot and then you're mixing in 2 leverage points, right? You can't put yourself at 1 leverage. You're going to have to put in 2 leverage pieces to get that much more up on the field. And, I think we'll talk about the leverage spots here in a few minutes, but, we'll stick into the main event. I considered fading, because what happens if Merab takes him down the first round, and then Yan wins the second round? Then Merab takes him down in the third round, and then he wins in the 4th or 5th round. That might not score well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much ownership for Merab at 40%. I mean, by comparison, I know it's slightly different price tag, but like Carlston is going to be, it's possible he gets down to 45. It's very possible. And you're looking at Merab getting probably close to 40. So to me, it's really tough to just try to get into that.
Yeah.
I understand from the takedowns. I guess it's really just that one route. Is if he gets through in the first round with some takedowns, builds some momentum, then that's his way to a decision, right? Because I don't see either of these guys finishing in 5 rounds.
No. And I mean, the crazy me on any other slate would maybe want to stack this fight, dude. Like, that's how crazy it is. But you don't even consider it. You can't on this slate, the way that your lineup builds come out. But I think this is going to be one of the last times you get Merab at this price tag. I mean, if he beats Peter Yan, he'll probably be a favorite moving forward as he gets closer and closer to the championship. I just, when I look at 9,200 for Yan, it's striking based. There's no grappling, right, Drew? So he's going to have to rely on knockdowns, which is 10 points each. It's going to be difficult to get there. I think you and I almost want to talk ourselves into fading the spot. But if you're going to take the Merab value, right, you're going to have to get leverage points to be unique, or leave money on the table. Where do you want to go after this one? Because I think those first 2 talking points of building your lineups are incredibly important for this particular slate.
Yeah, and I'll take a step back really quick. I think you made a really good point of starting lineups in that mid-range. So like with Carlston this week, but just in general, a lot of people have a tendency to go to the top range. So like over here, if I'm still sharing, if I hop back, let's include this. So people hop into an optimizer, they pull some projections or whatever, and they're just looking at, the highest priced people, who has the best odds and who has the best projection, and then throwing them in there. So they start with Peter Yan or they start with Bautista. And you really kind of get cuckolded, for lack of a better term, because what'll happen is you start up here, and that's your first guy in. So it's really tough for someone to go back to their very first click and then take them out. But if you start down here with Carlston Harris, you can easily, and I know I'm starting to slow down here, so hopefully this is, oh yeah. You can still hear me okay, right?
You're fine.
Okay, well, the computer doesn't like it. So my point is, though, like you start with Carlston Harris and you still have above 8,300 as an average salary, you can start to move up into like the high 8s or the low 9s. You get a feel for like how your lineup construction goes. If you immediately just jam in a $9,500 guy, you can go down to Carlston Harris, but no one ever goes back and unclicks their $9,500 guy to get someone less. And I hate being at a position of like, you have to play a $6,900 guy to get the rest of your lineup in. I'd rather kind of slowly build up and like, hey, I built the bottom half of my lineup. That looks great. Now I have enough to get to 9,100. I don't get to Peter Yan, but the rest of my lineup's great. I'm good with Nurmagomedov.
Yeah.
That's my thought process, though. I just love starting from the mid-range or even like a value. Even start from like the low 7 and say like, I'm good starting here, and then work your way up into the top guys. Again, in MME, it's different because you're setting your pool, but from a hand building perspective, I love that.
Yeah, when you build odds-based lineups, when you look at some of these pros that go to the GPPs through, and they just basically go off of odds implied inside the distance odds,
yeah,
you're going to be drawn into a guy like Cedricus Dumas, right? Inside the distance, extremely strong at his price tag, 8,800. You're going to be drawn into a Romanov because of the takedowns, because of the inside the distance.
There's 3 right there. If you want to go talk about those now. Dumas, Krylov, and Romanov all have similar inside the distance odds. They're all in the 8Ks. People are going to have one of them in every single lineup, most likely, if not two.
What do you and I want to do? What do you and I want to do? We want to build leverage upon that, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to talk about it real quick. Is I might be crazy enough to put 2 in. You know what I mean? Like I think you really realistically only need one of these guys, right? From what are we talking? Let's go from a Sensao down to say Bresky. I think that's your 7,700 to 7,200. That's your leverage zone. Volkov, if he wins, Drew, is going to kill off all of those Romanov lineups. I've seen a lot of hype on Volkanovski, a lot of talk up onto him. I'm just interested to see where he actually does come in. If he's really 16%, 15%, and Romanov is going to be 30, I'm going to have to stick my flag in on Volkov and say, hey, if he knocks him out in the first round, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, put your questions in our MMA chat on Discord. Keep putting them in YouTube because I see one question here. The Grant Asensao seems to be a very low-owned fight. Do you think there is a good fight to target in the GPPs for the leverage? Well, I will say this one is definitely could bust because they're 2 older guys that tend to keep it on the feet, go a slower pace. They look for knockouts. Asensao is not a DraftKings FanDuel friendly guy, right? Like he fights at a very slow pace, methodical. But what does methodical mean for me, Drew? What if he goes veteran approach, okay, at 10% ownership, and he goes takedown, takedown, takedown all 3 rounds, and then just blows up the scoring? Like at 7,700, I'm interested in him because I think people might want to go to Davy Grant. Maybe they think he's going to light up an old man, Asensao. Both guys are older and they have durability issues. I thought he might. I like Asensao and GPPs when we talked about the potential low-owned like leverage spots. I mean, it's not. It's a little bit of leverage, right? With Asensao, 10% compared to Davy Grant at 20.
Yeah, but I don't love the spot for Asensao. He looks so slow. But fights have historically been slow. He had last fight went for takedowns. Like it was out of the blue, but that's a path that's going to score very well for DraftKings. He scored 76 points in a win where he just took the guy down and negated anything. I mean, it's okay. It's not a huge ceiling. I just think it might be a crafty play on this slate. Like, where are you going? You're probably going to the Volkovs of the world. I think Span's going to be popular. Span was popular a few weeks ago. That fight was rebooked. Remember, it was a main event, Krylov versus Span, 5 rounds, and it got canceled. That's probably going to really hurt people. They don't like that. But yeah, those 3 there look like they're better values for upside. So Volkov, Span, and even Fremd I have because he's going to be super low. He's going to be like 10%.
Fremd is the ultimate one, right?
Fremd over Dumas because Dumas' inside the distance looks so good. Everyone's going to click it. But Fremd's odds are still respective. And they're still like respectable, and there's still like low ownership going to him. So he'll be 10, 12%.
I agree 100%. When you look at the elite leverage values, it's going to be Fremd, and he's going to have to school the young up and comer and Dumas, who is going to look for like something crazy. He's going to try to go for a guillotine. He's not going to be a guy that's going to grapple at a high rate. This is a guy that's more off the strike. He did get a submission in his Contender Series fight, which really opened eyes. And there's just been a ton of bias on these guys, Drew. Like you look at that inside the distance line, it's a glaring thing in his range, right? Dumas, like 8,800. I think Silva's plus money inside the distance. Carl Williams, we'll talk about later. That's a plus money, I believe. People are going to start their lineups with a Dumas because they're going to be drawn into like minus whatever 120 inside the distance line.
Yeah, and everyone above, Carlston Harris are still going to get some ownership. You're still getting some leverage. You're still getting leverage from the ownership, but they are going to get some. So what you're dropping is like 10% up to Carl Williams from Dumas, which is enough. I mean, honestly, you go up from Dumas, it changes your whole lineup. I think the interesting one though is like the top 7K range. Just no one appeals to me for building out lineups. I would rather skip that and take some values like you talked about with Marab, or you could take.
What about
Bresky? Martinez is okay.
Where does Bresky come out for you? Because Bresky's an interesting case, right? It's a heavyweight fight. Typically, a heavyweight fight's a little bit slower pace, so Vegas is going to have this probably at a lower pace. But this guy, last time out, Drew, this is going to be a hidden fantasy upside type guy. This guy had 124 strikes, significant strikes over 3 rounds. So he's got output on the feet. And what dictates that is potentially the grappler in Carl Williams here at 9K. Williams is going to push the grappling pace, right, at 9K. And if he's not able to get those takedowns, Bresky is a guy who's going to be able to land combos, potentially hurt him over 3 rounds. I think he could be an overlooked guy. And at 7,200, that fits that mold that you're talking about, right? You're not looking up at those upper 7Ks. You're trying to get unique and go to the lower 7K guys on this slate.
Yeah, so like the win for Carl Williams is really high. But again, talking about like, hey, who can finish in round 1 or round 2? Bresky is actually really close. I mean, mainly because Carl Williams is so low, but it's still like a 25% chance finishing, and he's probably around 20% inside of round 2. So there's still like upside for his ownership being so low. So yes, I agree with that one. I just threw it up on my screen. I don't know if you can see. I think this is where a lot of people start their lineups. So if you start Carlston Harris, if you just strictly look at odds, you're going to take 1 to 2, possibly all 3. I threw 3 in here just for example's sake. It's still leaving you 7,800. And that's also why I hate this top range of the 7Ks, is because I do think they're going to get a lot of unnecessary ownership when I would rather just take some leverage, like you said, on Bresky. I think Martinez is interesting. I have a lot of Nurmagomedov. But I do think Martinez is interesting. And no one's going to play him in.
The pace is going to be really, really bothersome on that Nurmagomedov versus Martinez fight.
Slow and
that's
methodical.
This is not your predicted. This is not Habib. Okay, this isn't grapple. This is a guy that is more of a striking based fighter, but he is very powerful. So like if Martinez pushes the pace, it's on him to make the pace of this fight, right? It's not going to be Nurmagomedov pushing the pace. So at 9,100, I was hoping he'd be like 15% on this slate. If he was a little bit lower, I'd have loved that. Martinez has been hurt in a bunch of his fights. Like, I expect potentially Nurmagomedov to be a slightly lower owned than our lineup HQ says, and Martinez might be a little bit higher because I think he game log hunters, right, Drew? People look at that and they say, "Hey, look at Martinez. He's been scoring pretty damn well for us."
Yeah, I just think he's just going to be really low owned. I think that's really the trick. And I think if you go up to that high 7Ks, like I said, I think people start clicking them unnecessarily, and Vegas may not show it, but I do think there's similar upside. And maybe it's not Jonathan Martinez. Maybe it's Bresky. I don't even know. I don't even think I looked at Tyson Nam. He is not popping anywhere for me.
No, he's got a limited path.
Okay.
Though. He's got a limited path, a very limited path. He's got to hurt. He's got to take Silva out, striking based, very quick, or I don't think he's going to get cooked, right? That particular fight is a perfect one to talk about right now because Bruno Silva is my key. I mean, I didn't even tag him as a core play because it's hard to on this particular slate. Like Dumas is right there, who obviously the metrics are going to say play him. But I still had to tag Bruno Silva because he's going to be lower owned. The guy is an action fighter. Tyson Nam is an action fighter. It's flyweight. They're little guys. They have a inherently – no, it's true. Inherently a faster pace. But that means fantasy upside. So Tyson Nam actually, his scoring window is so narrow. Like you said, it's based upon a knockout in the first round. And I just don't see how he wins the second and third round. He's probably going to get grinded out. And at 8,900 for Silva, if you're leaving money on the table with Silva, I think you're being unique right there, right? Like he's just probably going to be the odd man out. People would rather play a Williams. People are going to rather go down to the Romanov, the Krylovs. Krylov fight
Yes.
is an interesting one too. Like I say, that one was booked as a 5-round main event and rebooked on this particular slate at a catch weight. Krylov being 35%, he still can definitely finish Span. I know somebody in our YouTube chat says I like Span as a value. I don't hate it. I definitely don't hate it. It's just you don't really fall in this range, right? Like if you start with a Span and then you go with the value of Harris, it just puts you in this very bizarre price point. Where do you go from there? You know what I mean? Do you go main event and try to get crafty? It's just difficult.
Yeah.
How are you going to handle, like, I was hoping Krylov would be higher owned because Romanov, Krylov, Dumas, that's where your ownership is. This is almost the same thing we had last week, right? There's just this gap. The gap is Silva, Williams, Nurmagomedov. There's the 3-3 gap.
Yeah, he actually grays out as a poor leverage spot, probably obviously to most people, but I still think you want to have 1 to 2 of those 3 in that range, the high 7s or high 8s. But yeah, he's definitely at 35%. I would rather go up to Dumas.
And it makes
the other
sense.
one, yeah, go ahead.
It 100% makes sense, Drew. Like, you can't ignore the minus whatever it is, 135 inside the distance line, right? For Dumas, it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, and it's so close. There's a good chance that one of these goes, like it could be Dumas, goes up another 5 to 7%, and then one of these come in way under owned compared to what we project. That's also possible. I think go ahead.
There's a fighter we have not talked about, the Victor Henry versus Gravely fight. This one, even with it being 30% owned for Henry, Gravely coming in at 23%, the pace of the fight is really dictated on Henry. He's a striker. He's got a lot of combos. I would be shocked if he doesn't outstrike Gravely. Gravely is a little bit of a slower pace, and then he really gasses out down the second and third round. He's a gasser. He just slows down when Henry should be able to take over. I think a ceiling on Henry at 8,400 is actually going to be surprisingly high, Drew. I think that Gravely will be he'll be a bit of a punching bag. But listen, Gravely in his own right, he could go out there and hurt him in the first round and finish Henry. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, I wish I was hoping for lower ownership on Gravely if that were the case. But, I mean, I think I like to take a guy in Henry who has 3 rounds to work with and potentially a higher pace, right? Like striking metrics, you're getting those, what is it, 0.4 for every significant strike. Like those add up over 3 rounds if you have volume person.
Yeah, he doesn't check a lot of boxes for me. I think honestly there's a really interesting fight right below them, and that's probably why my sheet at least highlights them over Victor Henry.
You're talking about our boy, the pleasure man, Anton Turkalj. This man, this man had 11 takedowns in the Contender Series. This guy had 11 takedowns, and he would have destroyed any fantasy for your lineups. But when you're talking about potentially overlooked, I mean, I can't believe he's going to be lower owned than Petrino. Do you believe that?
See,
I think it's going to be closer.
It's really interesting. I think this is a critical fight. I think we talked about 2 fighters last week that are right in this range.
Andre Berrio, 8,200
for alt, right?
Yep, and 8K for Julian Marquez, who Marquez came out hot in the first, and then there were 7,000 significant strikes in the second round for Berrio, which helped carry some people to a win. This is an important one. You're right.
So I'll throw out a few numbers here, and this is what stands out to me. So if you look at just straight odds, and I'll even use RG, and then I'll just talk about my sheet for a second. So like just between the 2 of these guys, if you're just looking at the projections, Petrino checks out more, so he's going to get more ownership. I don't think that's going to happen. It just depends on how people build, or how optimizers spit out the top range to get an 8K Anton. But like just by viewing this, right, 50% implied odds, 50% implied odds for both to win, pretty even. But when you start looking at like how the fight could go in the first and second round, I have it like 35% chance of a knockout win for Petrino. And Turkalj is just like at 30% across a KO and a submission. So he's like a little bit more broad. And it seems like Petrino has one path to victory, which is a KO.
Sure.
And I have his odds extremely high for getting a KO. And compared to his ownership, there's actually leverage there. So it's an interesting spot. I don't know how that ownership, I have it lower than that.
Me
but
too.
we'll see what happens. I think Petrino is a guy, like, for me, I'm standing here and I think people, if they're going to click these evenly, we'll say, let's just, for sake of argument, these are even odds, even ownership. I'm going to exclude Anton. And I know you pinned him and he's the pleasure man. But that's the way I view it, is I think there is higher upside for Petrino. And I think if people do just look at odds, they're going to miss the scope that the KO rate is so high, potentially. It doesn't always work out. We saw it last week with Grasso. Congrats again. But Petrino, I think, is a really interesting spot that people could go to. Like, if they just want to save salary, they go to Turkalj, and I think that could be a mistake.
Yeah, and it's kind of binary. You nailed it, right? It's Petrino early by knockout, maybe even a second round can get you there, because it's like a second round knockout is 82 points right then and there. Like, he gets the knockdown points plus the win. We've got about 10 minutes until lock here, so make sure you get your lineups into your contests in time. And again, we thank FanDuel for sponsoring us. Make sure you guys are using the sign-up bonus for FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customer, bet $20 on any market, get $200 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions apply. Offer not available in Massachusetts. Again, Rob and I, lucky guys, and anybody else in Massachusetts, take advantage of a bet 5, get 200 in bonus bets. We're talking about bets and having fun here on this slate. I think you can what would be your favorite bet here? I know you're not an MMA guy, but like, what's drawing your attention? You kind of like a finish in that spot, right? That Petrino and Tricali, like.
But I don't think there's value on that. I don't think there's value on that. Maybe, I mean, maybe inside the distance a little bit, because it is plus money for Petrino. But yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of value there.
There's going to be a lot of finishes on this card. Let's just say it how it is, right?
Yeah, there should be. Yeah, for sure.
I would be very surprised if there's not scores that are just outrageous on your fantasy lineups.
And there's some that are going to be unexpected, because like some of these at the top 9K range, or like the mid or low 9K range, have much lower inside the distance odds. They're going to finish. A couple of those are probably going to finish. And then the ones in the 8s, one of those is going to bust. So that's really where JJ Aldridge.
That's exactly what you're saying. You're saying JJ Aldridge, the low-owned woman play, is going to destroy the slate. Let's talk about that one real quick. 9,400 for Aldridge. The comeback on Lipsky is about 6,800. And it's an interesting spot, right? Lipsky has not looked good in any of her spots. She got knocked out last time. She's been knocked out 3 of her last 4, which isn't a good look. But this isn't a knockout spot for Aldridge. Aldridge is going to have to try to grind out a win. And low-level women's MMA, what do we talk about, Drew? That was the Ricci side of things. We talked about the Grasso hitting last week. Like, there's variance in these spots. It's hard to play Aldridge on this slate, but like a ceiling win for her. What if she grinds her against the cage, does the little pitter-patter? I mean, it's just too narrow for me to play Aldridge. I wish I could, right? Like, that ownership, it was what would draw me in. But what about Lipsky? I mean, in a decision win at 6% owned, like if she wins the decision, and I'm not calling for it, at 6,800, she just allows you so much for your lineups. Like, I would take a shot if I'm 150ing. Take some shots on Lipsky. That ownership is very low. Why not? Yeah. I mean, she's striking based. They would score well over 3 rounds.
Yeah, I need to throw on like a weight on some of these, because it does seem like they're going to be, some of the women's fights get way more action than some of the other ones. And that's probably a big determinant. Yeah.
Let me talk about one more guy before the end of this show here. It's Alexander Romanov. This guy has been a fantasy staple for many people's lineups. This guy averaging 100.4 points out there. And even in a loss, he was putting up 51 in a decision, 67. This guy just goes for takedowns at will. He's a finisher at heart. We talked about the leverage, though. I mean, this guy has gassed out a little bit in obviously last fight he did. That's how he ended up losing. Volkov is an elite guy in this division at heavyweight. He can just light him up as he comes in, and there's your leverage. Like that Volkov is a great leverage point. Romanov going to be 30% owned. Do you think he's higher because he's a grappler? People love these grappling spots.
Who was that?
That would be Romanov.
I
totally accurate.
Yeah, I have him at 32.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's just so many important fights.
I think a lot of those guys in that 8K range are fair ownership values. Like I don't see them as huge spots. It's just a matter of getting the right combo in your lineups. Like I don't see a lot that are like super over-owned and none that are really under-owned. Just from win equity, I think if you can jam in some 9Ks, that's where a lot of your leverage comes from. Because no one wants to play a 30% implied inside the distance when you could go down to Dumas, Krylov, and Romanov all over 50% essentially. So I think the leverage, like you said, is, I mean, I don't know how people get to Bautista without jamming a couple underdogs.
It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
It's not the same case as Bo Nickel. Remember last week I had to fade Bo Nickel and make that stance in my lineups because his scoring was either a quick win or he wins in this odd, takedown and not get a million significant strikes. Like I had to be very, very careful. Remember, we have about 3 minutes until lock, Drew. Just throwing that out there. I see a YouTube question in here. Turkali Gravely or Henry Nam in cash? I'll let you take this one, Drew, because I think I'm a little higher on Turkali myself. I don't think you need to go to either of these two in cash. I think this is more of a GPP personally, but I guess Henry has a decent floor in his striking metrics.
Victor Henry?
Yeah, Victor. I think it's Victor Henry and not name in cash because of the significant strikes. It's inside the distance.
Inside the distance is terrible. So it'd be the significant strikes just from racking up some points.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think you have to go there. Yep, looks like no fights have been canceled. I mean, I'm waiting until we do a show, Drew, and we all are scrambling to figure out what the hell. Yeah, so it's nice to have 14 fights staying together at the moment here. We don't want that breaking news during the broadcast. That's not fun for watching any of this MMA lately without a late swap. But I have to say, this is an awesome slate. I took some stances like I am known to do at this stage. And again, I think you're never going to see Merab at this price again. To kind of put a bow on this broadcast here, I love Merab long-term as a commodity. He's going to struggle, against these upper tier guys, but when he hits his ceilings for fantasy purposes, Drew, it's just too hard to ignore. The guy just has 110 friggin' fantasy points every time he fights.
Yeah.
You're going to have to leave money on the table for that spot. We talked about the Petrino Turkali spot being an important one for the context of the slate. 100%. My decision-making on the Harris, I'm probably going to match the field and then just pray to God that, it's like a 83. Maybe he just gets 83 points, and it's the first fight of the night. So we will know where we are. But I would say it's fun to build some showdown-type lineups today. Like, I would go that route if you do miss out on this lock that's less than 60 seconds away. Final thoughts? Final thoughts for you, Drew?
No, I mean, at this point, no. I don't have any final thoughts for lineup construction. I'm gonna click Span for this last lineup I got.
Hey, Span is the guy who was healthy, right? His opponent, Krylov, is the one who pulled out with some tummy issues. Sometimes they get a little nervous, I guess, in the back, and then the doctors say, hey, you're not feeling good. You got to get pulled off the card. So, yeah, definitely an awesome fight night here for this particular slate. Putting a bow on things.
5 seconds. Let's do it.
5 seconds. Yeah, there we go. Great second show, Drew. I appreciate you coming on, breaking down the ownerships. And again,
it was a messy card, to be honest. It was messy from my perspective. I usually like to see a little bit more spread between like a couple top guys, but yeah, it looks like just balanced builds are going to be chalky, and hopefully we can get lucky on some underdogs. So that's about it.
Yeah, I understand that one. Well, we are out of here for the Crunch Time MMA show number 2. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.